Hi, I'm Chris, and this is Type 2 Talk. I wanted to talk today about a question that I've seen on the subreddit recently, and that is, should I, as a newly diagnosed Type 2 diabetic, get a glucometer or otherwise be tracking my blood sugars? And my answer, as a non-medical professional, somebody who is not giving medical advice, but giving out my opinion, is yes, you should. And the reason why is because while I am not those things, I am a bit of a data guy. And if you don't have data, you're not making decisions. You're letting other people do it through opinions or theories. And they might be right and they might be wrong. But without data, you have no way of figuring out which ones are good and which ones are not, which ones apply to you and which ones don't. Because there are diabetics who can have bread, and there are diabetics who really kind of can't, or can only have certain ones. There's diabetics that when they have a baked potato, their blood sugar numbers will skyrocket. And then there's others where it just goes up a bit, and it's relatively easy for them to manage and maintain. And you don't know what kind you are until you start to test. You have a way of measuring that result, and then you don't even have to graph it or chart it. You can just document it. Just make a list of what you ate, what your numbers were before, and then 2 hours later. This is what I did. The very, very first thing that I did after I knew I had diabetes was the following morning I woke up at 4 a.m., thanks Dawn Phenomenon, and I researched, can I get a glucometer? Do I need a prescription for one? How do you use them? Where do you get it? How much do they cost? What are all the different kinds? Which ones work with my phone? Because I'm also a bit of a techie and I really wanted my phone to do all the tracking for me. And then I went into work, and before I went into work, I hit my local Target and I got one that would work with my phone, would synchronize perfectly fine. And then when I had lunch that day, I used it for the first time. Ruined the spring in my Lancer. I wasted at least 2 or 3 different test strips, and that's fine. It's okay, no big deal. And then I had a number, and I was like, great, I'm going to go sit down and eat. And I ate bibimbap with rice. The bibimbap part was great, probably very healthy. I can look back now and see that. And at the time I thought, this is really healthy, right? Except for the rice, but I didn't realize that at the time. And I didn't know that until 2 hours later. Not even quite 2 hours later, because I was still learning. And I looked at my number, and my number was up, 100? And I went, what? Why? Why are you up so high? I don't want you up that high. Like, why? I'm not that uncontrolled. My A1C was barely over. I didn't come in with a 9 or a 10 or a 12. I wasn't at the hospital. We found this out because I finally made it over that numeric hump. But, am I really that bad? And in the end, the number that I had was by no means the end of the world. But I didn't have an expectation for what that number should be, so I was taking it a little bad. But at the same time, I was getting data. And at first, 2 data points, you freak out. And 4 and 6 data points, you're still kind of freaking out. But by the time you're 200 data points down, you can look back and go, that's normal. That's okay. That's what I expected. And in fact, you could, if you knew that was going to happen, if I was going to go back to that bibimbap place and I was going to have that bowl, I would make sure that I've got half an hour after I finished eating to go for a walk. Because that would probably be right. I mean, actually, I don't know, for that much rice. I might need more like an hour and a half as I think about it. But I now know that that's what I could have done at the time to help make my number better. I couldn't have known that at the time because I didn't have the data. So yes, if you are very newly diagnosed type 2, I think, personal opinion, not medical advice, I think, yes, you should go out and get a glucometer. And even if you're planning on getting a CGM, you're still going to need a glucometer. A, CGMs aren't always accurate or right. B, if it gives you a low or a high reading, you still have to confirm that by glucometer. By glucometer. You still have to poke your finger, test the blood, and see what that number is. But although I'm not the biggest fan of only using a glucometer, at least at first. Now, once you kind of know how your body's going to work and you can detect when things are off, or when you're like, hey, my numbers are shifting in ways that I wouldn't really expect them to, and maybe you try a CGM again. But having a CGM this first 2 or 3 months, I think is massively invaluable, because you have that opportunity to make major changes to your diet, your exercise, your sleep, your stress. And you're going to see those numbers change basically real time. And I think that is great for making a relatively radical life change of having to give up lots of foods, having to find alternatives to even more. There's very few foods I truly can't have, or I choose not to have. I really choose not to have rice. I choose not to have baked potatoes, or really potatoes in almost any form. Maybe a single potato chip if we get some fancy new flavor. And that's kind of about it. But there's plenty of things that I just find alternatives to. I eat a low carb, low sugar, no sugar added, whatever it is, ice cream. In fact, when I'm done making this video, I'm going to go in and have some ice cream, because I'm really looking forward to it. I've been looking forward to it through now, I think, 10 takes. And a 30-minute walk that I took before that. And there's plenty of foods I can still eat. And some I might just choose to rearrange the order. But I can only do that because I have the personal data of knowing how my body reacts to those different foods. And if I do have those foods, well, what if I had exercise? What if I had 30 minutes of walking afterwards? What does that do the next time I have this? This thing that sends my numbers up 100, 150 points. Well, maybe next time I go walking for 30 or 60 minutes. And yeah, admittedly, if it's pushing me up 150 points, I'm going to need a walk for a while, at least 60 minutes. But that also means that's the sort of thing I'm going to make sure I have that availability. I have that time to do. I wouldn't have that data if I didn't track from basically day one. And I did eventually get a CGM. I still use my glucometer occasionally to make sure it's accurate, to check to see, how am I feeling? And as I recently discovered, you can use it on soda pop to see if that soda pop has sugar. And I'll be posting that video separately here as soon as I'm done with the voiceover. But if you don't get a glucometer when you're diagnosed, you're flying blind. You just don't know what the facts are with your own body. No two diabetics are necessarily the same. There's something I could maybe eat, you can't. Or you could eat and I can't, without our numbers skyrocketing. You don't get that data without some measurement. CGM is one, and that's great. And where and when we can do it, awesome. But sometimes you can't, or you can't afford it, or your doctor won't prescribe it. Well, you have to get a glucometer anyways. So get a glucometer, check it. My first couple weeks, I was checking it in the morning when I woke up, before every meal, and then 2 hours after that check. And then I was letting my phone log it so I could see my numbers and make some early changes before I got my CGM. Once I had that, yeah, it was off to the races. And I made changes really fast. Reason why I'm a huge proponent of doing that at the beginning. Anyways, wanted to answer that question. Hope you guys have a great day. Thanks.